guys, we got this. Let's go. Gun wide trips weak. Pros X go. On one. Ready?
Right.
One of the quickest ways to be a better passer in Madden is learning pre-snap reads to determine the coverage your opponent has called. The ability to call the right play designs based on your pre-snap assessment will lead to a much more explosive passing attack and ultimately more fun when you're playing. In this HuddleGG tip of the week, we're going to go ahead and look at all the most common coverage shells in the game and show you the specific visual tells that you're looking for to be able to quickly decide what coverage you are facing. Let's start off with man coverage and discuss the ways you can tell the differences between each one. First, let's look at cover 0. Cover 0 is one of the easiest to determine as there's one factor that remains the same across all play calls. The safeties will align at 10 yards from the line of scrimmage regardless of the formation. This is because they're asked to play man coverage and they're coded to be closer to the wide receiver for better coverage. Now another tell is that the cornerbacks that are in coverage will also be aligned to the inside of the wide receivers. If you look at the positioning of the cornerbacks in relation to the route on the field, you'll see that they all start to the inside of those straight routes. One other thing to note about cover 0 is that when you see a safety that is aligned directly over a slot receiver where the route of the player goes through his legs, that's going to indicate that he's in coverage on the player and that the quarterback that's actually in front of him is in a blitz assignment. You're going to see this most often when you see dollar or dime looks when there are two slot cornerbacks. Now before we go any further and teach you about cover 1, we need to discuss that in order to get all the coverage tells that we're going to explain in this video, you need to have your first formation that you come out of be something that's not compressed. We use the routes of these formations as indicators to know the shading of the cornerbacks and where they're playing to help us determine the coverage. When you have a compressed set like a gun tight or a gun bunch, they don't give the same tells. So what you would want to do in that situation, if you're in a gun tight, is you want to start in a gun doubles or a gun spread, get your tells, and then audible into your formation that you want to run. Same would apply for gun bunch, as you'd want to run something like a wide trips formation, get your tells, and then audible into bunch, as that's going to be the quickest alignment shift for you and give you plenty of time to get off your play. Now let's jump into cover 1. Cover 1 is another easy one to determine, as every cornerback that is in coverage will line up directly over the top of his receiver, and the player will actually go right through their legs. It doesn't matter if it's a 1 high safety look like a cover 1 hole or a 2 high safety look like a cover 1 robber press, this will apply. There is one exception, however, that you want to be aware of if you run trip sets, as this will definitely go ahead and throw people off. If you look at the outside cornerback in trips, the player will not align the same versus all formations because of how close he is to the sideline when you put the trips to the short side of the field. He's going to line up in the inside only because the game is coded that he won't line up any wider than he already is. So if you want to avoid this and get the best tell, go ahead and start off with your trips to the wide side, get your tell, and then flip the play if you want to run a short side setup, so that way you go ahead and get the true indication that all 3 players are going through their legs when you want to attack cover 1. For the last man coverage, let's break down cover 2 man. Just like cover 0, all the cornerbacks will be shaded to the inside of the wide receivers, and you're going to have a 2 safety high look. This time, instead of the safeties being at 10 yards depth, they're going to be at that 13 to 14 yard depth that you would see in a cover 2. So one thing that you want to note about cover 2 man is that even though all the cornerbacks that are going to be on the play will be shaded to the inside, any player that's in a linebacker position and they're asked to go outside to cover somebody, they're going to be directly above that wide receiver threat. So you're going to see people that are going to be inside shaded if they're cornerbacks, but the linebacker is going to be directly above, so that route is going to go straight through their legs. I don't want you to get mixed up thinking that everybody's going to be inside. Now another difference between cover 2 man and cover 0 is that cover 2 man is typically a press man alignment in most formations. However, when you have trip sets where there's 3 receivers to one side, the slot cornerback is not going to press his man. And if you have 5 wide where everybody's away from their players, the slot cornerback's not going to press his man. And also the linebacker position player that has to go and cover one of those 5 wide is not going to press his man as either, unless your opponent commands him to do so. Now let's look at cover 2. Whether it's a Tampa 2, hard flats, or soft squat shell, they're all going to align the same. You're going to have a 2 high safety look, which is about 13 to 14 yards off the line of scrimmage. And you're going to have 2 outside cornerbacks that are going to line up 5 yards off the ball and to the outside of the wide receiver. Now, the most important player that you're going to want to pay attention to is actually the nickel cornerback, as what you're going to see is that he's going to be the one that's going to help you determine the coverage shell when there are other defenses that are showing a cover 2 look. He's going to be at 4 yard depth and inside the slot receiver. This is important because the blitzes that you're going to see out of a cover 3 seam zone all have the same alignment as a cover 2, but the nickel cornerback is going to be the one way to tell the difference based on his alignment. Cover 3 is up next on the list, and because there are so many variations of cover 3, it can be a bit intimidating, but we're going to try to simplify it for you. When they're in a single high safety, whether it's cover 3 sky or cover 3 seam, the tells are almost identical. Both will have the outside cornerbacks at the 8-yard depth, and they both will be directly over the outside wide receiver, where if you put a streak on the field, it's going to go straight through their legs. Now, the nickel cornerback will be at a 5-yard depth and shaded to the outside. That's very important because that's going to come into play later when we compare that to cover 4. When it comes to cover 3 seam, there's actually a little bit of a tell that you can tell the difference between that and sky when there are no blitzers on the field. We talked about it earlier where when there's blitzers, it can definitely be a cover 2 look and it's a little bit different. But when you're just calling cover 3 seam, everything will be the same except for the nickel cornerback. The nickel cornerback will actually be at the 4-yard depth, but an easier way to kind of understand that, he's going to be 1 yard ahead of the linebackers in a spot to where you can tell that he's a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. When it comes to cover 3 cloud, you're going to see that one side of the field is going to be exactly like cover 3 sky. You're going to see the nickel cornerback is going to be to the outside, and you're going to see how if you look to one side, it's going to be cover 3 sky. Now the other side is going to be cover 2 look. In most formations, the cover 2 cornerback is going to be at that 5-yard depth. But you're going to see that in some other ones, he's actually going to be pressed because he's going to be in a hard flat. So you definitely want to look at the differences between the two. When you see one side is going to have the cover 3 look and the other side to be the cover 2, you should expect to be cover 3 cloud. Now we're going to look at cover 4, and we need to split it between cover 4 with the quarter flats and cover 4 with the curl flats. They're 2 different colors, they do 2 different things, and they actually line up in 2 different places. Now, the ones that are the lighter pink, they're the quarter flats. You're going to find them in the cover 4 quarters, but you're also going to find them in some places that are called cover 4 drop, like the 3-3. Now, those are going to line to the inside of the slot receiver at the 4-yard depth. The reason why that's important is because the outside corners are going to be in the same spots as cover 3, where they're going to be 8 yards off of the ball. And when you put those streaks, they're going to be directly in between their legs. So having the ability to know that they're in a cover 4 quarters rather than the cover 3 by simply looking at that nickel corner and seeing that he's to the inside is pretty powerful. Now, another easy tip is that one's going to be a 2 high safety, one's typically going to be a 1 high safety, but it's just really easy just to go ahead and look at that nickel corner and say, that's my tell. Now with cover 4 drop with curl flats, what you're going to see that in most situations, like in nickel, you're going to see that the outside corner is going to be the same spot as cover 3, and also the nickel corner is going to be in the same spot as cover 3 due to the fact that it's a curl flat, right? Now, the difference is that almost at all situations, if you have a curl flat on the field, you're not going to have a 2 high safety look. So if you see a 2 high safety look and a curl flat and everybody's in the spot, you should think that it's cover 4 drop. The only difference to that is if somebody base aligns. And if somebody base aligns, you're no longer going to have those outside corners have those routes go through their legs, as they're now going to be shifted over a little bit. So that's the easiest tell. If you look at the outside corners, see that they go through their legs. You look at the nickel corner and he's at the same depth and he's playing outside leverage. Go look at the high safeties and see if it's 1 or 2. If it's typically 2, it's cover 4 drop. If it's 1, then it's typically the cover 3 sky. Now the last coverage we're going to look at will be cover 6. The reason I wanted to include this in the video is that it's going to look a lot like cover 3 cloud. However, the difference between the 2 coverages is that cover 3 cloud will have a curl flat on the field, while cover 6 is going to have that quarter flat. Now that you understand that quarter flats line to the inside of the slot receiver, you should know that if you see a cover 3 cloud look, all you want to do is just verify where that slot cornerback is in relation to the slot wide receiver. If he's inside the wide receiver, then we're going to know that it's cover 6. If he's lined up to the outside, we're going to know that it's cover 3 cloud. Now this video is intended to give you guys the foundation to be able to read almost every coverage in the game pre-snap when your opponent does not base align to disguise their coverage. There's going to be a few coverages here and there that do not follow the rule set, but they're going to be usually uncommon plays that aren't used too often. Now this is AntCap24, and I wanted to let you know that we appreciate you guys watching this to the very end, and look forward to seeing you again on the next HuddleGG tip of the week. If you've enjoyed these tips, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our YouTube channel for free Madden tips all year long.